They gave me 30 seconds to grab my kit before they dropped me into Sector 9. No briefing, no map, no partner. Instructor Vreth stood at the edge of the drop bay with his arms folded across his wide chest, his pale eyes watching me the way a stone watches the rain. He said nothing as the floor panel slid open beneath me. He didn't need to. His silence said everything he wanted it to say. You don't belong here, human. Let's prove it. I hit the ground hard, rolled once on my shoulder the way I'd been trained, and came up on one knee with the survival kit pressed against my chest. The forest around me was enormous. The trees on this planet grew wide at the base and thin at the top, like pillars that had been stretched by something enormous. The light came through in pale yellow strips. The air smelled like wet earth and something sharp like cut metal. I stood, checked the kit contents fast. One ration bar, a short blade, a fire strip, 2 water capsules, and a signal flare I was absolutely not going to use. Using the flare meant giving up. I wasn't going to give up. My name is Owen Calloway. I had been at the Galactic Interspecies Combat Academy for 7 months. I was the only human in my intake group. That fact had followed me from the moment I arrived, like a shadow that refused to change shape no matter what direction the light came from. I was the only one who needed a translation filter in my ear. I was the only one who ate in the East Hall because the smells in the main hall made my eyes water. I was the only one Instructor Vreth called by species name instead of by rank. Human, he would say, drawing the word out like it cost him something. Move faster, think slower, you'll live longer. I had never responded, not once in 7 months. There was no point in responding to someone who had already decided what you were. I simply trained harder, scored higher on the written assessments, and kept my head down on the physical drills where my scores were, admittedly, lower than my classmates. I was not the fastest. I was not the strongest. But I was steady, and I paid attention to everything. That, more than anything, was the habit that was going to keep me alive in Sector 9. I moved immediately. Not running, because running in dense forest burns energy fast and snaps branches and leaves a sound trail that anything with good hearing can follow. I moved at a steady walk, deliberate and quiet, choosing my foot placements on root and soft earth rather than dry leaves. My ears were open. I took in the baseline sounds of the forest. There were birds somewhere above, or things that functioned like birds. There was wind in the upper canopy, but almost none at ground level. The temperature was cool but not cold. I had trained in worse. The HFY were already in Sector 9. That was the part of this that was not in any official briefing, because officially this was not happening. What was happening officially was a solo navigation assessment for Cadet Calloway, unauthorized extension of standard field protocols by supervising instructor, which was a polite way of saying that Vreth had decided to make an example of me in a way that couldn't be written down clearly on paper. The HFY were the Academy's elite hunter unit. 6 graduates who had completed their full certification and stayed on as permanent assets of the Academy's performance division. They ran pursuit exercises against advanced cadets. Advanced cadets, not first-year cadets 7 months into a standard intake cycle. I had heard about them the way you hear about a storm that hits other towns. A cadet named Aldrich, who was 2 intakes ahead of me, had described his encounter with the HFY during a third-year assessment. He said the leader tracked him for 4 hours through open terrain and caught him without breaking a sweat. He said the other hunters didn't even fully deploy. He said he had felt, for the first time in his career, like prey. I did not intend to feel like prey. I found a stream within 20 minutes of the drop point, which was good because fresh water means you can extend your time in the field, and I followed it upstream for a while rather than downstream. Downstream was where conventional survival logic pointed. Anyone hunting me would account for that. I also used the stream bed to walk in, which kills scent trails and erases footprints, even though it was cold enough to make my feet ache through my boots after a few minutes. Small prices. I paid them. An hour in, I started thinking about what I actually knew about the HFY, not what I'd heard from other cadets, which was mostly fear dressed up as information. What I actually knew. Their unit name meant something close to those who complete the circle in the Velhari dialect. They were not a single species. The unit was mixed, which was unusual for an elite designation at the academy. They had a reputation for patience over speed, which meant they would not rush the pursuit. They would take their time. They would pin down my position through evidence rather than by chasing me directly. That told me something important. They were thinkers, not just hunters. I had been moving for nearly 90 minutes when I found the right place. A small clearing, slightly elevated above the surrounding forest floor, with a flat rock shelf on one side that would block wind. Good visibility in 3 directions. The 4th direction, the north slope, was dense enough that anything approaching from there would make noise doing it. I stopped there. I took out the fire strip and the ration bar and I made a small fire. The fire was not an accident. The fire was the plan. I sat down, broke the ration bar into sections, placed one section near the edge of the flame to warm it, and I waited. The smoke from a fire strip burns almost clean, very little visible plume, but the warmth and the smell carry. I knew they would find me faster this way. That was exactly what I wanted. Because I had been thinking, the whole walk through that forest, about the one thing no one had ever tried with the HFY. Not based on anything Aldrich had said. Not based on anything in the Academy's field records. The one thing no prey had ever done, because prey was always too scared to think of it. I was going to talk to them. Not negotiate, not beg, not explain myself or invoke rules or threaten consequences. Just talk, like a person, like someone who sat down at a table and expected the person across from them to also sit down. I had 20 minutes of quiet. Then the forest changed. Not loudly. There was no crashing through undergrowth, no calls between hunters, no deliberate display of presence designed to unsettle me. The sound simply shifted very slightly in a way that told me the birds above had noticed something moving below them and adjusted their calls by about 3 degrees of frequency. I had been listening for exactly that. They were close, very close. I did not stand up. I did not reach for the blade. I turned the section of ration bar over on the rock so it wouldn't burn on the bottom, and I said, in a clear, conversational voice, "I have enough for 2 if anyone wants some." Silence. A different kind of silence than before, the kind that has a person behind it. I waited. I kept my hands visible, resting on my knees. After a long moment, the undergrowth at the edge of the clearing moved and a figure stepped out. He was tall, broad at the shoulders, with a set of features that placed him as Velhari, the same species as Vreth. Though where Vreth always looked like he was barely containing contempt, this one looked like he was barely containing curiosity. He had a pursuit baton at his hip, deactivated. His eyes moved from me to the fire to the ration bar, warming on the rock, and then back to me. He said nothing. I nodded at the space across the fire. "I'm Owen," I said. "Sit down if you want." He did not sit down, but he also did not activate the pursuit baton. And behind him, at the edge of the clearing, I could see the shapes of 5 others, just beyond the tree line, perfectly still, watching. I exhaled slowly, kept my face calm, and turned back to the fire. "It's going to get colder in about an hour," I said. "The temperature drops fast after the second sun clears the ridge. I checked the climate data before the drop." I paused. "I don't know if any of you are bothered by cold. I am a little, so I thought I'd get the fire going early." The tall one still hadn't moved, but he hadn't left either. I broke off another piece of the ration bar and held it out toward him without looking up. "It's not great," I said honestly. "It tastes a bit like cardboard that someone was kind to once, but it's warm." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming toward me across the clearing. The tall one sat down across the fire, not close, not comfortable, but down. He looked at the piece of ration bar in my extended hand with an expression I couldn't fully read, and then he took it. He did not eat it immediately. He turned it over in his hand, examining it. "Sarath," he said. His voice was low and careful, like he was testing the word. I understood that was his name. "Nice to meet you, Sarath," I said, and I meant it. Behind him, 5 hunters stood at the edge of the firelight. None of them moved to leave. None of them moved to close in either. They were waiting to see what this was. I was waiting too, honestly. I had a plan, but plans are just the first draft of what actually happens. What actually happened next was going to be the real story. I poked the fire once to feed it a little more heat, and I settled in. The night was going to be long. I found, for the first time in 7 months at that academy, that I did not mind. Sarath sat across from me for a long time without eating the piece of ration bar. He held it, studied it, turned it over twice more. Then he finally put it in his mouth, chewed once, stopped, chewed again with the particular expression of someone experiencing something unexpected, and swallowed. He didn't say it was good. He didn't say it was terrible. He set his hands on his knees and looked at me across the fire, the way you look at a puzzle that has suddenly done something puzzles don't usually do. "You should have run," he said. "I know," I said. "I decided not to." Running gives you time. Time is advantage in pursuit scenarios. Running also assumes you want the scenario to stay a pursuit scenario, I said. I didn't want that, so I changed the scenario. He looked at me for another moment. Then he said very carefully, "By sitting down." "By sitting down," I confirmed. One of the hunters at the edge of the clearing made a short sound. I couldn't tell if it was a laugh or something else. I didn't look over to check. I kept my attention on Sarath because he was the one who mattered right now. If the lead hunter stayed, the others would stay. If he left, the whole thing unraveled and we were back to being hunter and prey, and I'd have burned my one interesting move. Sarath said, "Why does the fire not concern you? It marks your position." "You already knew my position," I said. "You found me in 90 minutes. The fire didn't help you find me, it just confirmed what you already knew. So the fire wasn't giving anything away. It was giving me warmth and something to offer." He looked at the fire. Something moved across his face, something that was not quite the contempt I was used to seeing on Vreth's face, but something in the same family. Evaluation. He was evaluating me, not as prey anymore, but as a question he hadn't expected to be asked. "What is the offering?" he said. "What do you want from us?" I thought about how to answer that. The honest answer was complicated, but I'd learned that complicated honest answers are almost always better than simple dishonest ones when you're trying to actually connect with someone. "I want to understand who you are," I said. "The Academy talks about you as a unit, a function, something that happens to cadets in field assessments. Nobody talks about you as people. That seems wrong to me." A long silence. The fire popped once. Then Sarath said, "We are not people to the cadets. We are a test." "I know," I said. "I don't want a test. I've passed plenty of tests. I wanted to meet the HFY." He didn't answer immediately, but he also didn't leave. He glanced once briefly over his shoulder at the tree line. Something passed between him and whoever was standing there, some silent communication I wasn't part of, and then there was movement. Slow, deliberate movement. And one by one, the other 5 hunters came into the clearing and sat down. Not all at the fire. 2 stayed near the edge, crouching rather than sitting, comfortable with the partial distance. One came close enough that the firelight caught her face. She was young, younger than I expected, with the kind of stillness that wasn't peace but was instead very controlled energy. A 4th hunter, the tallest of the group by a significant measure, sat directly to Sarath's right and said nothing but watched me with an intensity that was not unfriendly, just thorough. The 5th settled to my left and slightly behind me, which was interesting positioning, not threatening, but not neutral either. The 6th stood at the north slope edge of the clearing and didn't come closer, though they didn't leave. 6 hunters, sitting around my fire, eating my ration bar. I broke the bar into the remaining pieces and passed them around, and nobody refused. "My name is Owen Calloway," I said to the group. "I'm a first-year cadet. I've been here 7 months. I'm the only human in my intake." The young one near the fire spoke. Her voice was precise, clipped at the edges, like she was very used to measuring her words. "We know who you are," she said. "Vreth requested the drop specifically for you." "I figured," I said. "He didn't like me much from the beginning." "He does not believe humans belong at the academy," the young one said. It was not cruel the way she said it. It was just a fact being named. "He's not alone in that opinion," I said. "I've met a few others who agree with him." "But you stayed," Sarath said. "I stayed," I agreed. "Why?" I looked at the fire for a moment. This was the question I'd been asked before by other cadets, by the Academy's intake coordinator, even by the translation system during my first week when it flagged an anomaly in my emotional response patterns. Everyone wanted to know why a human had come to a place that had never had a human before, to train in a system that had not been designed with humans in mind, under instructors who ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. "Because it matters," I said. "Not just for me. If I wash out, it closes a door. Not just for me, for everyone who might come after me. I'm not here to prove I'm better than anyone. I'm here to show that we fit, that we can be part of this." I paused. "I'm not always sure I'm doing it well, but I'm sure I should keep trying." The tallest hunter, the one sitting to Sarath's right, spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and unhurried. "The instructor who sent you here, Vreth. You do not speak of him with anger." "Getting angry at Vreth would be like getting angry at weather," I said. "It doesn't change the weather, and it costs me energy I could be spending on something else." A short silence. Then the tallest hunter said, "That is an unusual way to think." "I've been told that," I said. Sarath had been quiet, listening. Now he said, "What do you want to know about us?" I had a list, actually. I had been composing it in my head since I sat down, but I didn't want to ask all of it at once, because that felt like an interview rather than a conversation, and interviews are transactions and conversations are something else entirely. So I asked the one thing I genuinely most wanted to know, the thing that had puzzled me from the first time I heard the HFY described as a unit. "You're all different species," I said. 6 different species in one unit. That's unusual at the Academy. How did that happen?" Something changed in the air around the fire. It was not bad, exactly. It was more like I had touched something real, something that had texture and weight to it, and everyone present had felt it. Sarath looked at the others, then he looked back at me. "Happened because of a mission," he said. "A real one, not an Academy exercise. A recovery operation on the outer boundary 4 years ago before any of us were posted here. We were from 6 different units. The mission went wrong very early and we had to adapt. When it was over, we had lost people from every original unit. What was left was us." He was quiet for a moment. "Command didn't know what to do with us afterward. We didn't fit any standard unit designation. So they put us here, where being unusual is, at least, somewhat expected." I held that for a moment. "I'm sorry," I said, "about the people you lost." He looked at me. "Most commanders offer condolences with an undercurrent of logistics. How quickly can you return to operational capacity? That kind of thing." "I'm not a commander," I said. "I'm a cadet who made you a fire and gave you cardboard." The young hunter near the fire made that sound again, and this time I was certain it was a laugh. A small one, contained, like she was surprised it escaped. The tall hunter to Sarath's right said, "My name is Doran." The young hunter said, "Sierra." One by one, quietly, the others gave me their names. The hunter who had positioned himself to my left and slightly behind was Quell. The one standing at the north slope was Fen. The 6th, who had stayed crouching at the far edge, waited until last, then said simply, "Hadri." 6 names, 6 people, not a unit, not a test. The fire was burning well now, and the temperature was doing exactly what I'd said it would, dropping as the second sun cleared the ridge and left the forest to the dark. I fed the fire a little more and opened the first water capsule. I offered it around. Sarath declined, but Sierra accepted and drank carefully and passed it back. "You know a lot about this sector," Doran said. "Climate data, terrain patterns. You prepared for this." "I prepare for everything I can think of," I said. "The things I can't prepare for are the ones that actually test you. This, for instance." I gestured at the 6 of them. "I had a rough plan. The plan was, make fire, offer food, talk. That was the whole plan. Everything after that I've been figuring out as I go." "That is not preparation," Quell said from behind me. "That is improvisation." "Good preparation makes good improvisation possible," I said. "You know the terrain, you know your resources, you know your own limits. Then when something happens that you didn't expect, you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from a stable base." Quell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Instructor Len said something similar to us before the boundary mission." "Was Len good?" I asked. "Yes," Quell said. The single word carried enough weight that I didn't ask more. Fen, still at the North Slope, spoke for the first time. Their voice was quiet, gender-neutral in a way that seemed deliberate. "You are not afraid of us." "I didn't say that," I told them. "I'm plenty afraid, I just don't let fear make my decisions for me." "Most cadets," Fen said, "when they see us coming, lose the ability to think. Their bodies take over, instinct, flight response." "I know," I said. "I felt that. When I realized you were close, about 20 minutes ago, my heart rate went up. My hands wanted to go to the blade. I made a deliberate choice not to let that happen." "How?" Sierra asked. She sounded genuinely curious. Not testing, not professional, just curious. "I thought about the worst outcome," I said. "If this doesn't work, if you catch me, what happens? I get dragged back to the perimeter, I file a protest about the unauthorized drop, Vreth gets a reprimand on his record, and the Academy logs me as having failed an assessment I was never supposed to be in. That's not good, but it's survivable." Once I knew the worst outcome was survivable, the fear got smaller. Not gone. Smaller. Small enough to work around. Sierra looked at me. "Humans think about failure before acting." "Some do," I said. "I do. It sounds like giving up, but it's actually the opposite. You can't be paralyzed by the worst outcome once you've already looked at it clearly and decided you can handle it." Hadri from the far edge spoke softly. "There is a practice in my culture. Before a significant action, you imagine the worst and you sit with it. You breathe through it. Then you act." "Yes," I said, "that's exactly it." A pause. "My culture calls it facing the stone," Hadri said. "I don't have a name for it," I said. "I just do it." The fire was comfortable now, and the forest had settled into its night sounds, and 6 hunters were sitting around my fire, and nobody had activated a pursuit baton. Doran had produced something from his pack, a small container of something pressed and dried that he set near the fire to warm. He offered it around without ceremony. Sareth took some. I took some when it came to me. It tasted like something between a nut and a mushroom, faintly earthy, with an edge of bitterness that faded into something almost sweet. I said so. Doran looked at me with what I was learning to read as surprise. "Most non-Vilhari find it unpleasant," he said. "It's different," I said. "Different is interesting. Unpleasant is only unpleasant." He didn't respond, but he passed the container around again. I asked Sarath how the pursuit exercises worked from his end. He told me, with the careful precision of someone who takes his craft seriously. He described the way the unit spread across a grid, how they triangulated evidence rather than direction, how they adapted their approach based on the behavior of whoever they were hunting. He spoke about it the way a craftsperson speaks about their work, with respect for the difficulty and no false modesty about the skill involved. I listened without interrupting. I asked one question at the end. "Has anyone ever surprised you before tonight?" He thought about it, really thought. "Once," he said. "A third-year cadet. She climbed. We don't usually account for vertical movement in dense forest because most species don't attempt it without equipment. She had improvised handholds. We found her, but it took longer than expected." "What happened to her?" She graduated top of her intake, Sierra said. She's at the border station now, Survey Division. I'd like to meet her someday, I said. She would probably like to meet you, Sierra said. This is considerably stranger than climbing a tree. And there it was again, that small laugh, and this time Doran's expression shifted too, just enough, just a fraction of amusement that he didn't quite suppress. Quell made a sound behind me that was almost a sigh but too warm to be one. Even Fen, at the north slope, tilted their head slightly. I didn't push it. I didn't try to hold on to the moment or make it bigger than it was. I just let it sit there between us like the warmth of the fire, real and temporary and worth having anyway. Tell me about the boundary mission, I said quietly to Sarath. Only if you want to. He was quiet for a long time. The fire shifted. Then he began to talk. The boundary mission had been a recovery operation, he said. A research team had gone offline in a region at the edge of mapped space, near a debris field that had accumulated over decades of old conflict. The debris field made sensor readings unreliable. The mission parameters were simple: find the team, extract them, report on the field conditions. 6 units, reduced to 1 operative each after the first stage went wrong because the debris field was not inert. Something in it was reactive to certain frequencies. The communications burst from the lead ship had triggered a cascade reaction, and 3 ships had been damaged badly enough to require emergency landing on the nearest stable surface. What was left was 6 soldiers from 6 different units, none of whom had worked together before, with limited supplies and no reliable comms, and a research team still somewhere in the debris field. How long? I asked. 11 days, Sarath said. 11 days. Without comms, without reinforcement, without a shared command structure or a shared language or a shared protocol for anything. 6 people from 6 species, making decisions by necessity, building something like trust 1 hour at a time because they had no choice. Did you find the research team? I asked. We found them, Sarath said. All 5, 3 were injured. We carried 2 of them for the last day and a half. I thought about that. 11 days of building trust from nothing, and then carrying people out on the other side. That's why the unit works, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Sarath said. Because you didn't have time to do it slowly, so you did it the only other way. You just decided to trust each other and then acted as if the trust was already there. Sarath looked at me. Yes, he said again, and something in the word was different this time, heavier, more careful. The night moved on. Sierra told me about her home planet, a place with 2 moons that rose at different times and cast crossing shadows, which meant that for a few hours each night there were no shadows at all, just even light from both sides. She said it made the nights feel enormous. She said she had never entirely gotten used to planets with 1 moon because the shadows felt lopsided. I told her I understood that. Earth's moon was singular, and sometimes I felt the absence of something without knowing what it was. And now, hearing her describe crossing shadows, I thought maybe that was it. Quell from behind me said in a slow and measured voice, "You speak about your home without sadness." I miss it sometimes, I said, but I chose to leave. It's different when you choose. Is it? Quell said. A quiet pause. I think so, I said. I hope so. Hadri came closer to the fire as the night deepened, not sitting but crouching at the outer edge of the warmth, their eyes on the flames rather than on me. They said, after a long while, "We do not usually speak this much during a pursuit." No, I said. It is strange, Hadri said. Not a complaint, just an observation. Strange can be good, I offered. Yes, Hadri said, it can. Somewhere around what I estimated to be the 4th hour of the night, the fire had settled to a steadier. Lower Burn and the group had found a comfortable quiet, not the quiet of strangers with nothing to say, but the quiet of people who had said enough for now and were simply existing in the same space, which is a completely different thing. Doran had fallen into what might have been a light rest, his eyes not quite closed. Finn had finally come down from the north slope and sat at the far edge of the fire circle, not participating but present. Sierra was picking slowly at a thread on the edge of her sleeve, not from nerves but from habit. Quell had shifted from behind me to my left side, a few meters out, visible in the firelight. Sarath had not moved since he sat down. He was looking at the fire with an expression I'd come to recognize over the course of the night as thinking. He thought with his whole face, quietly, like everything was processed deep before any of it surfaced. Then he said, "There are two among us who feel this exercise should be completed." I nodded slowly. I'd been expecting this. Not all 6 of them were going to feel the same way about what had happened tonight. People don't work like that. Units are made of individuals, and individuals have different weights on different sides of every question. "That's fair," I said. "This isn't a normal situation. I understand if some of you feel that the exercise needs a resolution." "Do you have a counter-proposal?" Sarath asked. I did. I'd had it since approximately the 2nd hour. "Let me stay until dawn," I said. "I'm not going anywhere, you know that. I'm not trying to escape, and I never was. When dawn comes, I'll walk back with you. You can file whatever report you need to file, but give me until dawn and give me 1 more hour of conversation before we go." Sarath looked at me steadily. "1 more hour of conversation about what?" "About anything you want," I said. "You pick the subject, all of you. Whatever you actually want to talk about. Not the exercise, not the academy, not Vreth. Whatever's on your minds." Another silence. Sarath looked at the others. Some kind of communication moved between them, not words, just attention, like currents underwater. Then Sierra said, with a quiet directness that I was beginning to really appreciate about her, "I want to know about laughter." I blinked. "Laughter." "Humans laugh when they are afraid," she said. "You mentioned it earlier. I do not understand this. In my culture, fear and laughter are far apart from each other. They do not overlap." "They don't for us most of the time," I said. "But there's a particular kind of fear. The kind where you can see the absurdity of your situation at the same time as the danger of it. When both things are visible at once, sometimes the body doesn't know which response to send, and so it sends both, and what comes out is laughter." I paused. "There's also a theory that laughter in fear is a social signal. It tells the people around you that you're still functioning, that you haven't been overwhelmed. It's reassurance. You're scared, but you're here, you're present, you're still in it." Sierra considered this for a long moment. "So the laughter says I am afraid, but I am with you." "Yes," I said, "something like that." She thought about it. "That is actually useful." "It can be," I agreed. Doran, who had appeared to be resting, spoke without opening his eyes. "Do you feel it now? The kind of fear with laughter in it?" I thought about the honest answer. "A little," I said. "Not the danger kind, more the absurdity kind. I made a fire in the middle of a survival assessment and invited the 6 people assigned to hunt me to sit down and talk, and it worked. That's so strange it's almost funny." "Almost," Doran said, and the edge of his mouth moved. It was brief, but I saw it. Quell asked me about human navigation instincts, whether we oriented by stars the way some species did, or by magnetic sense, or by something else entirely. I told him about how humans had used stars historically, how we'd built entire calendars and religions around them, how a good navigator could cross an ocean by reading the night sky, and how most modern humans had lost the specific skill, but retained a kind of emotional relationship with looking up. I said that on Earth, on a clear night, far from city light, the sky is so full of stars that it looks like someone scattered salt across black cloth. I said that humans, when they see it for the first time as children, almost always reach up as if they could touch it. Quell was quiet for a while after that. Then he said very softly, "We have a deep space posting. Fen and I in our next cycle, if it is approved. The transit will take us through a dark region between systems. No planet light, no station light, only open space. You'll see more stars than I can describe. I said. I know, he said. I have been thinking about it since the assignment came through, whether it will feel the way I think it will. It will probably feel different than you think, I said. Things usually do, but that's not a bad thing. No, he said, I don't think it is. The fire was low but still alive, and the night around us was at its deepest point, the hours before dawn where everything is still and the darkness has fully settled. The forest was quiet with the particular quiet of an ecosystem at rest, nothing hunting, nothing calling. In a few hours the light would start to change at the edges of the sky and we would begin the walk back. But right now there was this. 6 hunters and a human cadet sitting around a fire in Sector 9, and the story was not the one anyone had expected. Sarath looked at me and said, "You came here to change what happens when humans and others meet." "I came here to learn," I said. "The changing part is a side effect." He thought about that. Then he said, "I will file a truthful report." "I know you will," I said, and I meant it, not because I had any guarantee, just because I had been talking to him for 4 hours and I knew. "It will not make Vreth happy," he said. "I know that too," I said. He looked at the low fire. "Good," he said quietly, and something in the words sounded like a decision being made. I did not ask what the decision was. I let it rest there. I watched the fire breathe. And I waited for the first gray light of dawn to come find us where we sat, 6 hunters and 1 human, alive and talking, in a forest that had expected something very different tonight. The walk back took about an hour and 40 minutes. Sarath set the pace, steady and unhurried, and the group moved the way people move when they are not in a hurry and not performing anything for anyone. There was no restraint used on me. Nobody positioned themselves to prevent me from running. I walked at Sarath's left, roughly even with him, and the others arranged themselves around us with the natural ease of people who had spent years moving together through difficult terrain. Hadri was ahead of us, quiet as the morning. Doran walked behind, and I could hear the low sound of him and Quell talking in a dialect I didn't have words for, but the tone was comfortable, occasional, the way people talk when they're not trying to say anything important. The morning was cold in the way that early mornings in deep forests are always cold, with a wetness to the air that settles on everything and makes the light look gray before it turns gold. I had pulled my collar up against it. Sierra, walking at my right and slightly behind, had produced a narrow wrap from somewhere in her kit and was wearing it across her shoulders with the efficiency of someone who had thought about this before they went into the field. She said without preamble, "Vreth will try to file the assessment as a standard completion. Caught at dawn." "Technically accurate," I said. "Technically," she agreed. "What do you think he'll do when he sees you walk me in?" She thought for a moment. "He will not show what he feels immediately. He will wait until he has a controlled environment. Then he will request a closed review." "And Sarath's report?" She glanced ahead at Sarath's back. "Sarath's reports are thorough," she said. "They have been questioned before. They have never been successfully refuted." I absorbed that. Good to know. "You are not nervous about what comes next," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "A little," I said, "but I looked at the worst outcome last night and it was survivable. I've survived it once already in my head. It's easier the second time." Sierra was quiet for a few steps. Then she said, "Do you do this with everything? Look at the worst outcome." "Most things," I said. "Not all things. Some things I just do without thinking too hard, because thinking too hard about them would make me talk myself out of it. Like making a fire and inviting 6 hunters to sit down with you." "Exactly like that," I said. A brief silence. "That was," she said, "a very strange thing to do." "Yes," I said. "It worked," she said. "Yes," I said again, and she made that small contained laugh one more time, and I decided I liked the sound of it quite a lot. We cleared the forest edge at the perimeter marker at approximately the 3rd hour after dawn. The perimeter here was defined by a low sensor post on each side of a cleared corridor, and beyond the corridor there was a holding area, and then the Academy complex itself, its gray and angular buildings visible over the top of the ridge. The sky had gone gold and clear, a good morning by any standard. Instructor Vreth was waiting. He had stationed himself at the mouth of the corridor with two junior staff members behind him, one carrying a log recorder, one carrying a medical kit, which told me exactly what he had expected to find walking out of Sector 9. He was standing in the formal posture he used for disciplinary situations, back very straight, arms folded, weight evenly distributed. The expression on his face was controlled in a way that was itself a kind of expression. He looked at me, he looked at Sarath, he looked at the group. His eyes moved across all 6 hunters, checking for something, maybe some sign that they had completed the pursuit, some mark of conclusion, a restraint cuff or a capture log or the particular posture of a successful hunt. He did not find any of it. What he found was 6 hunters walking out of the forest with a cadet they had been sent to pursue, walking beside them, unhurt, unrestrained, talking quietly with the youngest of them. The silence that followed was the most interesting silence I had experienced since arriving at the Academy. Vreth's eyes came back to me. "Cadet Calloway," he said, and his voice was level in the way that a river is level before a drop, smooth on the surface with everything complicated happening underneath. "Instructor," I said. "Report on the field assessment." I thought about how to answer that. The most truthful answer was also, in this case, the most strategic one. I entered Sector 9 at the assigned drop point. I navigated to a suitable position and established a base. The HFY unit located me within the expected time frame. I was in their custody from that point until return to the perimeter. I paused. I am prepared to give a full account to the review board. Vreth's expression did not change visibly, but something around the edges of it shifted. The HFY will file their assessment report through standard channels. "Yes," Sarath said. His voice was calm, with an edge underneath it that was not quite challenge but was definitely not submission either. "We will." The junior staff member with the log recorder glanced between Vreth and Sarath, with the expression of someone who had expected to record a very different kind of event. Vreth looked at me for a moment longer, the way you look at something that has not behaved the way it should, and you are calculating what that means for the next steps. Then he said, "Medical check, then debriefing in 20 minutes. "Understood," I said. He turned and walked back toward the complex. The two junior staff followed him. The one with the log recorder looked back once over her shoulder. She was young, a first-year administrative cadet by the color of her trim, and her expression was not unfriendly. She looked at the group of us and her eyebrows rose slightly, not dramatically, just the small, involuntary rise of someone who has seen something they did not expect to see and is quietly interested in it. Then she looked forward again and kept walking. I turned to the group. Sarath was looking at me with the steady attention I had come to recognize as his form of focus. The others were arranged behind him in the easy way that wasn't formal but wasn't careless either. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it for all of it. The night, the conversation, the walk back, the way none of them had made this harder than it needed to be. Sarath nodded once. "The report will reflect what happened," he said, "not a version of it, what happened." "I know," I said. Doran said from the back, "The food was not good." "I know," I said again, and this time I was smiling when I said it. "We will tolerate it," Doran said, and his expression did the thing it had done twice during the night, the brief, controlled shift at the corners of his mouth that was the closest he came, apparently, to showing that something had landed right. Sierra said, "Safe travels, Owen Calloway." "You too," I said. Hadri nodded from the far edge of the group, saying nothing, but the nod was the right kind. Quell raised one hand, a small gesture, economical, but I understood it for what it was. Fen watched me with those careful eyes and then inclined their head slightly, which I chose to take as the positive thing it looked like. And then they were done. because they were people who had said what there was to say and didn't need to extend things past their natural end. They moved off, not together but parallel, each of them taking the path toward the Hunter unit's separate facility block. I watched them go until Sarath's figure disappeared around the corner of the perimeter post. Then I turned and walked toward the medical station. The medical check took 12 minutes. The medic, a round-faced woman named Della who had processed more post-field assessment cadets than she seemed to want to count, scanned me with the same brisk efficiency she probably applied to everything. She noted the cold exposure in my feet, made a note, gave me a warming patch for each ankle, and cleared me for the debriefing without comment. As I was leaving, she said, without looking up from her log, "Vreth had the emergency kit out before you came back." "The full one." She did look up then, briefly. "Whatever you did in there, it was not what he expected." "No," I agreed, "it wasn't." She looked at me for a moment. "Good," she said, and went back to her log. I had 19 minutes before the debriefing. I used them to wash my hands and face in the locker room, eat the half of the ration bar I had kept back, and sit quietly on the bench for a while with my eyes closed. I ran through what I knew. Vreth had sent me into a pursuit exercise without authorization. The HFY had been deployed outside their standard assignment parameters, also without authorization. The exercise had not concluded as a standard pursuit, which meant there was no clean way for Vreth to file it as a routine assessment. He needed to make the story into something that either protected him or transferred the irregularity to me. The debriefing was going to be his attempt to do exactly that. I was ready for it. The debriefing room was a standard administrative space, 3 chairs, a table, a recording panel in the wall. Vreth was already seated. The Academy's day shift administrative officer, a Belhari named Coordinator Asen, was seated across the table, which was new. Asen was someone I had interacted with twice during intake processing. She was meticulous, fair, and operated with the kind of professional neutrality that was more useful than most people gave it credit for. She was here because this situation had already escalated past a standard instructor-to-cadet debrief. Someone, likely the junior staff member who had been at the perimeter corridor, had flagged the anomaly up the chain. I sat in the 3rd chair. Vreth did not look at me when I entered. Asen did, with the particular look of someone who is simultaneously assessing a situation and not yet concluding anything about it. "Cadet Calloway," Asen said, "this session will be logged. I will take your account of the field assessment that concluded this morning. Instructor Vreth has provided an initial summary, which is on record. You will provide your account in full." "Understood," I said. I gave my account in full. I was precise. I named every decision I made and the reasoning behind it. I described the drop, the navigation, the fire, the first contact with Sarath, the night in the clearing, the conversation, the walk back. I did not editorialize. I did not accuse. I simply described what had happened with as much detail and accuracy as I could manage, in the same order it had happened. When I finished, Asen was quiet for a moment, reviewing notes she had made. Vreth said, without looking at me, "The cadet's account contains several inaccuracies regarding the authorization of the assessment parameters." I said, also without looking at him, "I would be happy to supplement my account with whatever documentation is available regarding the authorization chain." Asen made a note. "Instructor Vreth, please specify the authorization reference for the deployment of the HFY unit in relation to Cadet Calloway's assessment." A pause. "The unit operates on standing deployment authorization within Sector 9, Vreth said. "For standard senior cadet assessment exercises," Asen said. "Cadet Calloway is a first-year cadet. Please specify the deviation authorization." Another pause, longer this time. "The assessment was a judgment call within my instructional latitude," Vreth said. "Instructional latitude for first-year cadets does not extend to active pursuit exercises in Sector 9 without a senior review board sign-off," Asen said. She said it without inflection, as a statement of fact. I'll need to review the chain of decision-making. Both parties will be available for further sessions pending that review. Vreth said nothing. His expression remained controlled, but the control was doing more work now than it had been 5 minutes ago. Asen looked at me. "Cadet Calloway, do you require anything at this time?" "No," I said. "I have everything I need." "You are dismissed for the day. Report for standard schedule tomorrow." "Thank you, Coordinator." I stood. I walked to the door. I did not look at Vreth as I passed his chair. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see there, but because looking would have been an act, and I had no interest in performing anything for him. This was not about him, not really. It never had been. It was about what could be built when you stopped letting other people's definitions of impossible keep you small. Outside the room, in the corridor, I stood for a moment in the morning light coming through the high windows and let the quiet of it settle. My tablet chimed. A message, source listed as the HFY Unit Administrative Channel, which was not a channel I had ever received a message from before. I opened it. It was Sarath's report, not the summary. The full report, marked as filed with the Academy's Performance and Ethics Review Division, copied to the commanding officer's office and courtesy copied to me. It was 11 pages. It covered the entire exercise, beginning to end, with the same thoroughness and lack of editorialization that I had come to associate with Sarath in the few hours I had spent with him. It described the deployment parameters. It described the first contact. It described the night in the clearing with a specificity that was almost startling. And at the end, under the section titled Cadet Performance Assessment, it read, "The cadet demonstrated exceptional field conduct, adaptive decision-making under pressure, and capacity for meaningful cross-species engagement. Recommend recognition. Recommend review of deployment authorization." I read that last line twice. Recommend review of deployment authorization. In 11 pages of careful, precise, professional language, Sarath had done what he said he would do. He had filed a truthful report, not a version of what happened. What happened? And what happened was damaging enough to the authorization record that no amount of creative framing from Vreth's side was going to make it uncomplicated. I closed the report. I took a breath. I thought about a fire in the middle of a forest and 6 people sitting down around it, and the way the night had felt when it was at its deepest point, quiet and full at the same time. The review board convened 4 days later. I had been expecting a small session, an administrative review, a few people with tablets, a formality before whatever outcome they had already mostly decided on. What I was not expecting was a room with 7 board members present, 2 of them from the senior faculty tier, and all 6 members of the HFY unit seated on one side of the room on a voluntary attendance basis. Voluntary. Nobody had required them to be there. They had come because they chose to. Vreth was there, at a separate table to the left. He was wearing his formal instructor uniform, which was a level of formality I had never seen him use during regular training. He had brought an administrative support officer with him, which suggested he had gotten advice on how to handle this. His expression was the same controlled mask it had been during the debriefing, but the control was working harder now, visibly, and the gaps in it were more apparent to someone who had spent 4 hours studying the difference between a face at rest and a face performing rest. The board chair, a tall Mhari named Director San, opened the session with a precise summary of what was under review: unauthorized deviation from first-year assessment protocols, deployment of a senior pursuit unit outside designated parameters, potential risk to cadet welfare, and as a secondary matter, the content of the HFY unit's formal assessment report and its implications for performance review. Vreth's support officer filed an opening statement arguing that the deployment fell within an instructor's judgment latitude for escalated assessments of cadets demonstrating unusual capability profiles. It was professionally argued. It was also not quite accurate in its reading of the protocol document, and the board chair asked two specific questions about the language in that document that the support officer could not fully answer. Then the board chair asked Sarath to speak. Sarath stood. He did not use notes. He spoke for approximately 8 minutes in the measured, precise way he did everything, and what he said in those 8 minutes laid out the sequence of events with a clarity that left very little room for interpretation. He described the deployment request that had come from Vreth's administrative channel. He described the parameters that had been relayed to the HFY unit. He described the deviation from standard first-year protocols as he understood them. And then, at the end, he said something that had not been in the written report. In 11 years of pursuit exercises at this academy, he said, we have engaged with a large number of cadets across multiple intake levels. In 11 years, no cadet has done what Cadet Calloway did. Not a senior cadet, not a specialist intake. A first-year cadet, unauthorized deployment, 7 months into a standard program, responded to an active pursuit scenario by choosing engagement over evasion, and by doing so, created a situation in which the exercise ceased to be a pursuit and became something else. He paused. I am not sure what the Academy's curriculum calls what happened in Sector 9, but I am certain it should be studied, not penalized. The room was quiet. Then Doran stood without being called on, and the board chair looked at him and did not ask him to sit. He said 3 sentences in the unhurried way he said everything. The cadet was placed in an unauthorized situation by an instructor who did not believe humans should be at this academy. He handled the situation with more competence than most cadets handle authorized situations. The report speaks to what we observed. My addition is only this. What we observed was worth observing. He sat down. Sierra did not speak. She looked at me from across the room once with the directness that was her particular quality and nodded slightly. I nodded back. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. I sat in the corridor outside with my hands loose in my lap and my eyes on the middle distance, and I used the time to think about what I would do if the outcome went wrong. Not to catastrophize, just to check, the way you check a stitch to make sure it's holding. It was holding. The board chair called us back in. Director San read the findings in the clear, formal voice that she apparently used for everything. Instructor Vreth had exceeded authorized parameters. The deployment was ruled an unauthorized deviation. A formal review of his instructional record was initiated, effective immediately. Cadet Calloway was cleared of any protocol violation. A commendation was entered in my record for demonstration of cross-species engagement capacity in field conditions. Vreth said nothing. He stood when the board chair finished, said he understood the findings, and left the room without looking at me. I watched him go. I felt nothing particularly strong about it. A little tired, maybe. A little relieved. Mostly I was thinking about the last part of the board chair's statement, the part she had read in the same neutral voice as everything else, which was that the Academy's Curriculum Committee had received the HFY unit's report and would be reviewing the possibility of incorporating cross-species engagement methodology into advanced field training protocols. Incorporate into the curriculum. I sat with that for a moment. The quiet weight of it. Something had moved. Not because I had pushed it hard, but because I had made a fire in a dark forest and sat down and talked to people, and the people had turned out to be real, the way people always are when you give them the chance to be. I walked out of the review board room into the afternoon light of the academy compound. The day had turned warm and clear, and the second sun was already past its midpoint, which meant the shadows were starting to lengthen toward the east. I found the mess hall and got something to eat and sat at the corner table in the east hall where the smells were manageable and the light was good in the afternoon. I was on my second cup of something warm that passed for tea when someone sat down across from me. I looked up. It was Sarath. He had his tray with him, and on the tray was a covered container that was definitely not Academy mess food. He set the tray down, sat, removed the lid from the container. Inside was the pressed and dried food he had shared at the fire from his pack in the middle of the night. He slid the container across the table without ceremony and looked at me. I looked at the food, I looked at him. "You came here," I said. "I was hungry," he said, a beat of silence, "and you were here." I picked up a piece of the food. It tasted the same as it had in the forest, earthy and bitter at first and then something almost sweet at the end. It was not easy food. It was interesting food. "It's still good," I said. Sarath looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at me. Something was different in his face now than it had been at the beginning of the night in Sector 9. Not much, but something. The calculation was still there, the carefulness, the precision. But the thing that had been held back behind all of it, the thing I had felt him deciding about across the whole long night, that was a little closer to the surface now. "The curriculum committee may reach out to you," he said. "I heard that," I said. "If they do," he said, "you should say yes." "I probably will," I agreed. He was quiet for a moment. "You were afraid last night," he said. "Yes," I said. "You did not show it." "I showed it a little," I said. "I just kept talking. When I'm afraid, if I keep talking, the fear has to share space with everything else. It doesn't disappear, but it gets smaller." Sarath considered that. "In my culture," he said slowly, "silence is the preferred response to difficult situations. Silence gives nothing away." "I know," I said, "but it also gets nothing back." He was quiet for another long moment. The mess hall moved around us, cadets coming and going, the low noise of 100 conversations in a dozen languages. The translation filter in my ear worked steadily, catching the ones that came close and letting the rest drift. Then Sarath picked up a piece of the food from the container and ate it, and he was not looking at me when he did it. But there was something in the angle of his head and the set of his shoulders that was less closed than it had been, less like someone sitting across from a situation they were evaluating, and more like someone sitting across from a person they had decided to know. It was a small thing. It was also somehow everything. I drank my tea. He ate his food. The afternoon light came through the East Hall windows at a long angle and made the table between us warm and bright. "Sierra said the food tasted terrible," I said. "Sierra says that to everyone," Sarath said. "It is a test." "What's the right answer?" He looked at me. "You already gave it." I thought about that. Then I smiled, and he didn't, but the edge of his expression moved just enough that I stopped needing him to. Outside, the second sun was settling toward the ridge. The shadows on the compound ground were lengthening, crossing each other, twin pools of shade overlapping and separating as the angle changed. Like Sierra had described on her home planet, the shadows from two moons crossing on a clear night, making the dark look different than it did from a single source. I thought I understood now, a little, what she meant about things looking lopsided with only one shadow. Some things take more than one light source to see clearly. Some things you have to come at from two directions at once before they make sense. I had come to this academy from one direction. I had found, in the middle of a forest in the dark, that there were 5 other directions I had not considered, and 6 people who knew them well, and an entire shape of the world that I was only now beginning to understand. I finished my tea. I sat in the warm light, and I was, for the first time in 7 months at the Galactic Interspecies Combat Academy, entirely at ease.